Hey everyone, it's me Lone, hope you're doing alright, and the latest hotfix for Tiny Tina's Wonderlands is out now. Specifically, it is version 1.0.1.0G, and this patch in particular has a lot of people talking because it comes with it a bunch of balance adjustments and specifically nerfs that some people aren't so happy about, so I'd like to talk about that in this video. If you enjoyed this video, please like it, I would really appreciate it. Subscribe if you're new, and please consider supporting me on some of my other social media platforms like Twitter, all of which are linked in the description below. So with that out of the way, let's get to the topic. Alrighty, on the screen right now, we do have the hotfix notes for the latest update to Wonderlands. If you want to check them out in full, I'll link it in the description below. But for today's video, we're just going to be going over the balance adjustments because I just want to have that general discussion as to whether these changes are affecting people's enjoyment of the game. And on that note, I am going to be bringing up this tweet by Gearbox on the Play Wonderlands Twitter so we can read people's reactions to this hotfix in real time. So we'll get to that after, but very quickly, let's just go through these changes. We won't be reading them in full, but just covering the kind of top line. First, when it comes to spells, Magic Barrage has been improved, which is nice, kind of across the board. Damage has increased, cooldown has reduced, which is nice. Cloudburst, I can never pronounce this, Cloudburst Arc Torrent has been improved in effectiveness as well, which is nice to see. I never really used that, but it's nice to see for those of you that did. When it comes to weapon balance adjustments, sniper rifles, this was absolutely necessary. Increase all sniper rifle damage by 20%. Like, there was no point, in my opinion, of using a sniper rifle in the game unless you happen to find a really, really good one. Like, in almost all instances, pistols were probably better. So it is nice to see sniper rifles get a buff like shotguns did in the last update. Whether they actually become effective, who really knows? Maybe I'll try out a sniper rifle here and there, but at least a 20% damage increase is a not insignificant change. Magic Poison SMG, that has been improved in effectiveness. Legendary pistols, this is one of the big ones, right? So pretty much for a lot of pistols in the game, they've been reduced in effectiveness. So reduced masterwork handbow damage scaling, crit damage scaling for a lot of these ones. And I think the main one that everyone's up in arms about is about liquid cooling. Liquid cooling was pretty much the most popular weapon in the game from what I saw anyway. Addressed an issue with how liquid cooling damage scaling was being calculated. So now it actually calculates it properly. How it was operating before was not intended by Gearbox. So of course, change it if that's not how it was meant to be. But it has reduced the effectiveness of liquid cooling. Now, I've seen videos on how it works now. It still seems amazing, don't get me wrong. This is probably one change I think everyone should have seen coming from a mile away. Like, you look at any meta build on YouTube, for instance, for Wonderlands, liquid cooling is mentioned in pretty much every one, that and Buffmeister. So I can see why liquid cooling was reduced, but it's still apparently very, very good. So I don't think people have too much to complain about that. But generally, when it comes to pistols, I do see an opinion that maybe they went a little bit too far. Like, understandably, pistols were very good, but do these changes go a little bit too far? I guess we're going to have to wait and see in the coming days and weeks. And then some changes were actually made to the backstory, which I do like, or the backstories of Fate Makers. So Village Idiot, pretty much the go-to backstory in the game, very good in most instances. Added a -3 wisdom penalty. I think that is probably fair. Like, Village Idiot was used and useful in almost all circumstances, so having this kind of nerf to that backstory is not so bad. Like, you know, it's one that I use and I don't mind it. And it's also nice to see that Elves, Monk, and Alchemist are all getting a little bit of an increase. So Elves, you're getting increased dexterity and attunement. Monk, you're getting increased wisdom and intelligence, and Alchemist, you're getting increased attunement as well. So I do like the changes that they've made to the backstories. Could they be refined further? Probably. But yeah, Village Idiot was by far, I reckon, the best, so it probably did deserve some sort of a nerf. Is -3 a little bit too much? Nah, I think it's fine, to be honest. But yeah, that's the TLDR, though I saved this one to the end because I really want to talk about it. Clawbringer, of all classes, got a nerf. The Ore passive ability or passive properly scales to the Fate Maker instead of giving a flat rate. Now, I understand that this was something that wasn't working as intended, like with liquid cooling. It wasn't working as intended, so Gearbox saw the need to make the change. What frustrates me just a little bit is that this change has come before the much needed buff that Clawbringer absolutely needs. We all know that it's probably the worst class in the game, right? And probably when it comes to next week's update, the first DLC for the game, we're probably going to see a buff to Clawbringer. I'd be very, very surprised if we didn't see it because I've been using one as my main when I'm playing the game. And I can just see everyone else doing ridiculous damage. They're walking through chaos with breeze, or the chaos chambers with breeze. And I'm just like, man, I'm struggling. Like Clawbringer, it needs a lot of help. So what annoyed me a little bit was seeing this nerf, because Ore was probably the one saving grace of Clawbringer, in all honesty. So seeing this right now before all those other changes just makes this class and this build even more or less useful in the game. So unfortunately that has happened, but we'll be talking about that in a second. Going to the Twitter or to the tweet and seeing people's reactions. Jodstude is just not happy as well. You've got someone here saying, look, these changes are necessary for the long-term health of the game. I do agree. I'll be talking about that in the next section, but I think some people do have some legitimate, grievances with this particular update. Clicking on this response, sugar-coated pills are still hard to swallow. That is true. This guy brings up a wonderful point that I just mentioned. 100% agree, but I just wish they maybe waited with the ore fix until they brought some Clawbringer buffs out. 100% agree. Like, that absolutely should have happened. What else was said here? Nerfs can be necessary, but 90% of these particular nerfs were absolutely not necessary. They nerfed LC into the ground. It's completely useless. I don't think it's completely useless. I don't think it's completely useless. But still, I can understand why people are frustrated. And I don't know why that was there. The liquid cooling fix should have been expected by everyone. Absolutely, it should have. What else has people said? People calling the pistol nerfs unnecessary when most of them had better base damage than most snipers and launchers. And yeah, pretty much, I agree. Like, pistols did need a little bit of a reduction. Did they go too far? Again, we're probably not quite sure yet, but I think they did deserve a nerf. Though, some people have also argued the alternative, that instead of nerfing the best performing weapons, why not buff everything else around it to bring it all up? I guess that just depends on Gearbox's intention of how easy they want their game to be, especially when you get to Chaos 20. So I'll be talking about that more in the next section. But who cares that weapons that are legit are the only thing people using are getting nerfed? Yeah, I get that as well. What else? Oh, this guy. I wish I got a physical edition, then I could sell this. I honestly think the nerfs aren't that bad. Like, if you want to sell the game because of this one change, fine. But yeah, I think that's the point. A lot of good changes, some are questionable, like Clawbringer, I agree. But the meta with liquid cooling was already so stale. Every meta build, every build that I've seen from a YouTuber on YouTube had liquid cooling mentioned in some way, had Buff Meister mentioned in some way. So I can see why liquid cooling was nerfed in some way. But yeah, I was finally having lots of fun playing with Clawbringer. Now it's even not worth farming for the rest of the gear for my build, unfortunate. Yeah, all 6 classes are good, but Clawbringer is probably the weakest of the 6 and they nerf it. Big L by them this time. We'll be talking about that in the next section. So speaking of, let's get to the next bit. Alrighty, so as you can see, not so many people are happy with this particular hotfix for Wonderlands, and I'll take a step back and talk about my thoughts, and I think a good place to start is that particular tweet that said that, you know what, balance adjustments like this and changes like this are necessary for the future health of the game. And on paper, in theory, I do agree. When it comes to games like this, you don't necessarily want people to be felt like they're forced or squeezed into a particular playstyle or to using a particular weapon. And beforehand, that was absolutely liquid cooling. I saw that one coming from a mile away. Every time I watched a Wonderlands build video on YouTube, that's all I saw, right? So that one was probably warranted, let's be honest with ourselves. And I saw a specific video that showed liquid cooling still bossing. It was still doing really well. Obviously not as well as it did before, but it's still very viable. So I can understand why that one happened. On the pistols front, not as much. Like, I do agree that pistols were the overperforming build. And I saw some people, I think K6 said that, you know what, maybe they went a little bit too hard when it came to the pistols changes. And I think there is a genuine argument that can be made here, and a question that can be asked more so, that were pistols overperforming or was everything else underperforming? Because there is a general school of thought going around in Wonderlands right now that a lot of these other weapons like shotguns and sniper rifles, even though recently they've had a buff, they seem not that effective in the game, especially when you get to the later levels. Now, obviously, Chaos 20 is not meant to be a walk in the park. It's not intended to be easy. And there are some weapons that make you breeze through those particular modes, right? Those particular chambers. So I understand that, but I still do. I prefer if Gearbox were to adopt the mentality like, you know what? Instead of seeing something as overpowered, let's view these other things that are actually underpowered and let's boost them a little bit more without touching that other stuff and see what happens then. Because in Wonderlands and Borderlands, you're meant to feel like a badass. You're meant to feel powerful, running through enemies, killing them, running and gunning and looting and shooting. That's the whole point of Wonderlands and Borderlands. Like, this is the entire reason why we play the game, is to feel like a badass. So when you're making nerfs like this to some of our favorite and best weapons, it does make it a little bit less enjoyable. It does make us feel that, you know, maybe you went too far with this. I don't feel, you know, it doesn't feel as fun anymore. It doesn't feel as enjoyable playing this game like it did beforehand. So I definitely take stock in that argument a little bit. So I would prefer, generally, if Gearbox were to try and buff stuff before they nerf stuff and see what changes, see what happens to the meta, see what happens to people playing the game. I know that they have ridiculous stats that they go through. You know, when are people most often dying? How easy are people getting through chaos chambers? Do they want people to take 10 minutes in a chaos chamber or 5 minutes on average? They have numbers out the ass when it comes to that stuff, and that's what they're basing a lot of these decisions on, right? It's not like it is subjective opinion, obviously, but they have access to all this data that we don't. So they are seeing stuff in a different light, and when they see people getting through chaos chambers with pistols and liquid cooling in 2 minutes flat on average, hypothetically, that's obviously an exaggeration, but when they see that, they see an issue that needs to be changed. And they may not necessarily see that, you know what, this is actually a lot of fun. I like doing this. I like breezing through. So a lot of factors need to be considered in that regard, so I understand that. But also there's another line of argument here that Wonderlands, Borderlands, and even games like Fallout 76, they're PvE games, right? When it comes to a PvP game, there is much more urgency to make changes and balance adjustments and nerfs like this because you have people competing against each other. So you really do need an equal playing field. Wonderlands, not so much. There isn't that urgency to make sure that everyone's playing the game in a similar way or that they're all competitive against each other because there's no PvP, right? Everyone's playing offline or even they're online, you know what I mean? They're playing on their own or just with their friends. Like, so when they're you know, ultra powerful and they're having a lot of fun, even though they're wrecking through chaos chambers, does that matter? Does that matter as much as compared to a PvP game where, yes, there does need to be balance. There does need to be parity when it comes to people's builds. I don't think it matters as much. I still understand the need to make some of these changes. Again, I do think it's necessary to ensure that not everyone's picking the one same damn build. 100% agree with that. 100% agree. But generally, I would prefer, as I said, to see buffs before I see nerfs. And the other thing that I would like to say is that when it comes to these, when we have a lot of little hot fixes like we've had, it takes people a while to adjust. What I would prefer to see is a little bit more time in between changes and just have Gearbox, like with next week's update, for instance, when it comes to the DLC, have all your balance adjustments released at once. So we can take the time to digest it, think it through, try out different builds, try out different weapons that were buffed or other ones that were nerfed, and then let things settle a little bit. Like, we've had 2 hotfixes in fairly quick succession, and I think people are still trying to catch up with what happened last time. And when it comes to changes like the Clawbringer one, like, some changes take a while to implement. And I understand if you want to do a big buff to Clawbringer, it takes a little bit to try and incorporate that. And I can understand why that's necessary to do as part of next week's update. So why was the change to ore needed now? You know what I mean? Like, if you needed to fix it, totally understand. It wasn't intended. But bring it with the other buffs that are inevitably going to be coming to Clawbringer. Do it at once, so it doesn't make me feel for the next week that my build is even worse in the game when it comes to especially Chaos 20. So I wish that the patches would come at a little less frequency and just throw them in all at once. Don't do these little minuscule changes unless there are big changes that need to be made. An example, liquid cooling probably is one that justifies a hotfix. Or if something's completely broken, yeah, do a hotfix to fix it. But all these other balance changes, I would prefer to see grouped up in one big update, right? So that's what I'd say about that. But I still do understand why Gearbox make these changes. I don't want people to be so harsh on them because they are just doing what they think is best for the longevity of the game. They see a future in this game. I see a future in this franchise. I want to see these DLC do amazingly well. Bloody plane is flying over. There's been planes all night. I can't even record in peace. But I understand it. I think take it easy a little bit on Gearbox. They'll get it all right eventually, hopefully. But yeah, that's what I think about this particular update. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and let's get to the conclusion of this video. Alrighty, Wastelanders, that is all from me. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And until next time, this has been Lone. Please take care of yourselves, and would you kindly keep fighting the good fight.